What's up, guys? 1-1 last night, but because one of them was an underdog outright win, it was actually a slight winning night. So VCU, hell yeah, congratulations to them. Didn't even get the best number. That line went up to 9. I was a little bit worried about that, but again, it seems like when I miss the closing line value, the majority of those seem to still hit for me, which is weird. I don't know, just the situational handicap just trumps it if you get it right. That seems to be the case. VCU, an outright winner. Game was higher scoring than I expected. Both of those teams don't really play particularly high scoring games, I wouldn't say. Weird that the game got into the 70s, at least on the VCU side it did. But VCU with the win there will take it. And then the NBA game just didn't get there. I mean, it was close. It only missed by like a bucket in the end, although it was looking worse than that throughout a lot of it. That was the Philadelphia 76ers, I think they had a really bad stretch in the middle of the game, and then they still somehow wound up almost covering and only missing by a bucket. We'll move to today. Of course, the tournament starts today, and the tournament, the NCAA tournament, of course, March Madness, baby. And of course, March Madness gets kind of like the isolated days here, I think, in the first days. I think the NIT has like a break after the first round games, so that everybody can just watch March Madness. I'm actually skipping the entire NHL card, even though on the first days of March Madness, you can usually find like decent angles and decent numbers in the NHL and maybe even in the NBA while people aren't paying attention to it. But I just don't see an angle, even though it's a big NHL card. I really don't love the angles here. You could say that maybe Winnipeg is in a letdown spot because they just beat the New York Rangers and now they're playing another road game in a row at the Devils, and the Devils did just win against Pittsburgh, which I thought was actually kind of in a bad spot for New Jersey, if I remember correctly. Did I miss on that game? I might have. I forget. But the lean would be to the New Jersey Devils, I guess, and that's kind of all I got in the NHL. I'm not doing anything with that. We'll go over to the NCAA tournament here. I have 2 plays. I mentioned I'm already on Texas Tech, which is a night game tonight. I usually wind up having like 2 plays each of the first 2 days in the NCAA tournament. It's kind of the way that it winds up happening. I don't know why exactly, but Texas Tech, I mean, this almost looks like a pros versus Joes situation. Everything about the situation puts me on Texas Tech. I like Texas Tech here. I laid 4.5. It looks like it's stuck at like 5, so you can still lay 5. They got 53% of the cash on their side, but 64% of the tickets over on the other side on NC State. NC State is the darling, man. Everybody saw what they did in the ACC tournament, and they beat North Carolina and Duke, man. And now we're getting 5 points with them as an underdog. If they can beat those 2 teams, well, obviously they can come within this number against Texas Tech, right? I think that's what the public is going to be thinking. They love what they saw. It's all recency bias out of NC State. If anything, I think maybe this line should be a little bit higher on Texas Tech, because the odds makers are telling you Texas Tech is the better team, man. NC State would not have gotten into the tournament at all if they had not won the ACC tournament. And the other thing about this is kind of an unprecedented situation. So not only is the stock going to be high on NC State because of what they just did, and also Texas Tech didn't look good in their final game that they played where they got knocked out of the Big 12 tournament and really had a bad offensive performance. But that was against Houston. Houston is an elite defense, probably the best defense in college basketball. So I don't know if you can really put much stock into that outcome there. Texas Tech, I think if anything, that's just going to motivate Texas Tech because they played a really ugly game, and it's going to give us a little bit extra value on the Texas Tech side just because they looked real ugly in that last game that they played in the Big 12 tournament. It does mean they have extra days off, though, which is what I was just about to get to. Sometimes you can have a team that has too much rest, and that's not good, because if a team has too much rest, that might break some of the momentum that they had, which could be the case maybe, especially if a team won one of the earlier conference tournaments. Although it seems like that doesn't wind up being the case in the NCAA tournament. It does seem like the team with extra rest does actually beat the spread majority of the time. I think it's actually somewhere to the tune of almost 60% of the time if they have an extra. But then you're getting into them having an extra week rest or something. I forget where the cutoff was on that stat, but I don't really care about that much, really. But just look at the individual situation, really, man. I mean, sometimes you can have a team where the rest isn't going to help them. It's going to hurt their momentum, and a team that is carrying all this momentum in, that's a good thing for them. But I don't think that's a good thing for NC State here at all. As I said, this is unprecedented, man. I don't remember this ever happening where a team had to play in an opening round of their conference tournament, won 5 straight games in 5 days, all as an underdog. Oh, no, they were a favorite against Louisville, and then they were an underdog the rest of the way. So 4 out of the 5 games, the last 4 of them, they were all an underdog. Won all of those. One of them went into overtime as well against Virginia, and a couple of them came down to the wire, the Duke game, really, and I guess North Carolina, sort of. 5 games in 5 days, they won all of them, pulling off upset after upset. It's like, how is this team going to have anything left in the tank, man? They've had a few days off, yeah, but it's not that many days off. And Texas Tech is just lying in wait, and they're the better team. I just don't like this, man. NC State, I just really don't know what they're going to have left here. And this is a Texas Tech team that is also a pretty decent, well-rounded team and is the better team in this matchup. So for all those reasons, I like Texas Tech. I think NC State, yeah, that winning 5 games in 5 days, really, really not an easy thing to do. Very difficult thing to do. Yeah, I just don't like it. So I will be on Texas Tech. And then the other game I'm going to be on is going to be on Michigan State, even though I'm a little bit worried about this because the market looks like it's against it with, well, 51% of the tickets and 56% of the cash on the other side on Mississippi State. This is going to be the first game up in the tournament, tipping off a little bit after noon time. But so it looks like the public is slightly on Mississippi State, even though it does look like they have the slight cash discrepancy as well, which I don't know. The line in this game has been kind of all over the place. I think it opened Michigan State -1. It looked like I saw it get like to Michigan State 2 or 2.5, and then it came down to 1.5. So it's still up from 1 to 1.5 overall, but it looks like it went up a little bit higher and then came back down. So there might be some guys in disagreement on this game, maybe from the professionals. I'm not really sure, but I like Michigan State here, man, because I think they're one of those teams. You always get like 1 or 2 teams in the tournament where they're that team that everybody's saying this team shouldn't even be in, man. They have an ugly record. Michigan State's, they haven't even won 20 games this year. They're 19-14 or whatever. Mississippi State has a better looking record than that. And everybody's going to say, well, Mississippi State's an SEC team, so they play in the tougher conference, which is true. But look at what Michigan State faced, man. Michigan State, this is Tom Izzo, man. What he does is he schedules really difficult out-of-conference games because he wants to battle test his team. And everything is about getting battle tested for March for Michigan State, which is why you see them do this year after year where they don't have a great season record. If they're not like one of the top teams in college basketball, they're still a pretty good team, though. And KenPom has them in the top 20, and he has Mississippi State lower than that. So KenPom does have Michigan State as the better team here. The odds makers are telling you they're the better team. It's a 9 versus 8 seed. I don't think we really care about that. But the odds makers obviously know more than the seeding, the selection committee does as far as which teams are better than other teams, of course. So it is a situation where you do have a lower seed who's actually the favorite over the higher seed. I believe Michigan State's the 9 here. But so those tend to be situations you do want to look at a little bit, just because the odds makers are telling you that they got the seeding incorrect. But otherwise, though, as I was about to say, Michigan State, man, while other teams in the big conferences schedule a lot of cupcakes to try to like bolster their record, Michigan State does the opposite. And they scheduled like Duke, Arizona. I think they had some other really difficult game in there too. They scheduled a really tough out-of-conference schedule. That's what Tom Izzo likes to do. He likes to get his team battle tested and prepared for the tournament and have a lot of tough games on the schedule there so that they are familiar with playing a bunch of tough games, like tournament style environment games. And I believe a bunch of those games are on the road too. So Michigan State, so I like that aspect of it. So I think that just makes them undervalued in a lot of cases like this. People look at their record and think, look how ugly their record is. And look at these games that they play where they have a bunch of these losses and whatever. Yeah, but like I said, that it's just because Izzo likes to battle test his team. Mississippi State, yeah, sure. I mean, they're battle tested enough. They're in the SEC, but people are also going to look at it and see Mississippi State just blew out Tennessee in the SEC tournament, man. This Mississippi State team is good, man. They made that nice run in the SEC tournament while Michigan State kind of just didn't make noise in the Big Ten, so people just won't even remember seeing Michigan State. But they played a pretty decent game against Purdue in the Big Ten tournament and just wound up falling a little bit short. Michigan State played pretty competitively, I think, every time they played Purdue this year. So I like Michigan State, man. And like I said, Tom Izzo's main goal is March. All he's focused on is March. This is why you see Michigan State seem to overperform in like every tournament. That's because this is what he does. They have a gauntlet of a regular season schedule, so their record tends to look worse than they actually are. Then they get into March and they kind of surprise some people with some wins because they're actually better than their record would lead you to believe. So I think that's the case there. So I like Michigan State. And plus, I think there's that extra motivation there with people saying, well, Michigan State, look at how horrible their record is. Like, they shouldn't even be in. Like, the bracketologists, I think, had them, like, kind of on the bubble by the time it got to the end of the season there with all the bid steals and whatever. It was like, will Michigan State even get in? Do they even deserve to get in? Then people are looking at it and saying, they don't even deserve to be here, man. And there are some people saying Indiana State should be in over Michigan State. No, I don't think so. As Ken Baum has Michigan State in the top 20. I mean, there are some teams that got left out of the tournament that are ranked well in the Ken Baum rankings that probably should be in, like maybe Villanova and teams like that have good metrics. But people are saying that Indiana State should be in over Michigan State. No, Indiana State, maybe they should be in. It would be cool if they were in. They should be in over Virginia, man. Look at we saw what Virginia did the other night. Let's not shit on Michigan State too much. Michigan State's way better than a Virginia team. Michigan State plays defense almost as good as Virginia does. But Michigan State's just a better all-around team. Mississippi State is also a similar team to Michigan State. Michigan State is just a little bit better at everything. I think Ken Baum has Michigan State has both these teams balanced, but he has Michigan State as just the slightly better offensive team, the slightly better defensive team, the slower paced team out of the two, even though both of these teams play fairly slow and play pretty good defensively. He just has Michigan State a little bit better in both of those respects. And he also has Michigan State as one of the unluckiest teams in all of college basketball. He does have Mississippi State as being a pretty unlucky team as well. But again, he has Michigan State even more unlucky. So it's like these two teams are very similar to each other in a lot of ways. But Michigan State is just the more extreme example in like every single case, basically, or just a little bit better in all those cases. So it's weird. It's like Michigan State is just a somewhat better Mississippi State, almost, you could say. But yeah, Michigan State, I think they'll have that extra motivation just because people are shitting on them, saying Indiana State should be in over Michigan State. No, Indiana State should be in over Virginia, but also Michigan State, by the way, they played Indiana State during the regular season, which a lot of people just don't look at that and don't see who these teams played during the regular season. But Michigan State, yeah, again, even when they scheduled like some of these mid-majors, they scheduled good mid-majors on the schedule. They played Indiana State, and oh yeah, they beat Indiana State, and I think they beat them pretty easily too. I think it was like a double-digit win for Michigan State, if I remember correctly. Let's see here. Where was that game? Yeah, they won by 12. It was at Michigan State, though, I believe. But yeah, even so, still, so I'll be on Michigan State -1. I believe you can get right now. You can get the -1, maybe -1.5, whatever is out there. Like Michigan State in that one, even though I don't like what I'm seeing in the markets, that scares me a little bit. And then in the NBA, I'll go and make one play in the NBA that seems similar to last night, but I don't know, man. One thing I was looking at in the NBA, but I'm not actually going to do it, is I was looking to play against the Denver Nuggets because they've run off this nice string of wins, man. They just beat, they just won against the Timberwolves in their previous game, and they're returning home from a road trip. So Denver's in a bad spot. Yes, that's what it was. They lost a close game to Dallas the game before. Then they beat Minnesota. Now they're returning home from a road trip. So that's a bad spot, man. It's a letdown spot on top of the return home distraction spot where you have all of home life coming back in to distract you. It does look like they are the public team, although the line has moved up on the Nuggets. So I was ready to be like, I'm going to probably jump in on the New York Knicks here. But then look at the Knicks. They're not in a good spot either, man. They're finishing a road trip here. They've won the first 3 on the road trip. It's tough to play 4 road games in a row and be up for every single one of these. And they pulled off upsets at Sacramento and at Golden State coming into this game. So the Knicks aren't exactly in a good spot either. So I just have to lay off it. The game that I'm going to actually be on, though, is to fade the Milwaukee Bucks. This spot is not good for the Bucks, man. They're on a back-to-back, even though I believe they had multiple days off before last night's game. But what did they do last night? They went into Boston. They played the Celtics in this weird one-off road game after they'd crushed Phoenix. They beat Philadelphia and Phoenix the 2 prior games then, and beat Phoenix. Well, not crushed, but beat them by 11 and scored 140 points. So that looked good. And then they basically couldn't possibly have looked better in a loss last night, where they only lost to Boston 122 to 119, lost by 3, which looks good. But Boston really had a handle on that game. The Celtics were winning by like 20 points pretty late in the game, so it looked like the game was over, and maybe the Celtics took their foot off the accelerator because Milwaukee didn't let up, and Milwaukee got right back into that game. They cut the game to like a 2-possession game, or even a one. They actually cut it to a 1-possession game in the final few minutes of the game, and we're still within 1 possession even later than that at one point too. So Milwaukee really put in an effort to get back into that game, only to still fall short against the Celtics. And now they have to come back home from Boston with no time off on a back-to-back, turn around and play again right away against the Brooklyn Nets. This is not a good spot for Milwaukee, man. And they have Oklahoma City, the Lakers, and the Pelicans up next. So 3 bigger games up next, too. So this is a sandwich spot, too. And they might be hung over from the Celtics game last night. They're returning home from a single road game, which is odd, but it's still kind of a return home spot. But it's also going to be a hangover spot and a sandwich spot for all those reasons. I don't think they're going to have full focus on a Brooklyn team that's coming in there. Brooklyn obviously has not been playing well, but you got Brooklyn. I think they're going to be focused, man, just because they get to play one of the better teams in Milwaukee here. Milwaukee, as far as like the playoffs are concerned, I mean, they're obviously making the playoffs, so it's not like they are like really like trying to fight to like get into the playoffs or anything like that. They're already obviously going to be in and be one of the higher seeds in their conference. So I don't think this game really has that much meaning to them. Brooklyn's lost 4 games in a row, but they have had a weird schedule. They played 6 straight road games. That was really difficult for them. And one of them was that weird Austin game against San Antonio, I think. But yeah, 6 games in a row essentially on the road, all of them true road games, except that San Antonio game. You can still call that one a road game too, though. Then they return home. And I always say the return home spot is bad. And they had this weird single home game with then another long road trip coming up right after that, a 4-game road trip, and they didn't play well in that home game either. It's that weird isolated home game sandwiched in between 2 road trips. That's usually a pretty weird spot and not a good spot either, and they didn't play well in that game either against New Orleans, lost by double digits. Now, however, they're the more rested team because they have a day off, whereas Milwaukee does not. And they get to go back out on the road, which I think they can kind of push the reset button here, start a new road trip here. And they get to play a pretty good team right off the bat. So I think you're going to get a focused Brooklyn team starting a road trip here, whereas Milwaukee, I think their focus is going to be in question. Coming off that Celtics game with no time off and then having bigger opponents up next too. So I'll do it. I don't see market percentages on this yet, but it looks like the Bucks are up from 9 to 9.5, even going through the 9.5. So you might not even have to get on this right away, and you might even be able to get 10 on this game. But we can call it Brooklyn 9.5 for now, I guess. So Brooklyn Nets minus 9.5. That'll do it for me, man. Those plays one more time are going to be on Michigan State -1 in the tournament. Texas Tech -4.5 also in the tournament in the night slate. Brooklyn Nets plus 9.5. And then, and that's in the NBA. I think that's going to do it, man. I know I didn't put out a bracket video. I'm still trying to like finalize my bracket, even though I don't really feel like I want to change my bracket from where I already had it, because I did the whole like value, like leverage thing, which actually kind of goes against like what you see with like your market reads and stuff. You actually wind up going like against some of the teams that you actually don't really want to go against necessarily in some, just because you think, even if you think, oh, this team might lose this particular game, like the first game or whatever, you actually think they have a better shot to like get further in the tournament than some of these other teams. So then you have to like weigh those things against each other. And when you start in reverse like that, you wind up having to pick like the later rounds first. And that's just kind of the way it works out. But so you're trying to find like value basically against your opponents in the bracket pools, which is, it's completely different than betting. That's the whole thing. So you're trying to find that value there, starting with the champion. I can tell you that I think the team that has the most value, that is being under selected based on what their odds are to actually win the whole thing, I would say has to be Arizona at this point. So likely, I believe I'm probably going to have Arizona as my champion. And if they get to the Final Four, they're going to be playing in Phoenix. So I do like that. So they're going to wind up having a home crowd if it happens. There's just some sketchy things about Arizona, which, I mean, they don't have the most experienced coach, but they do have a very experienced roster, although the experience on the roster isn't really these guys playing with each other. But of course, now they've had a whole year to play together as a team. So they do have that chemistry now, but they have like Caleb Love on their team now, and he was in a NCAA championship game, I believe, right? Or was it the Final Four? No, I think they made the championship game 2 years ago with North Carolina. So he was on that team. And they also have, I forget his name, Jackson, something like that. They have one guy who was on San Diego State in their run to the championship game last year. So they have experience. They have some guys that have experience in deep tournament runs. And then, of course, some of the other guys on Arizona, I think were probably on the Arizona team that made the Sweet 16 and lost to a really good Houston team a couple of years ago. So they do have experience. So I do like that. But Arizona, I mean, they're in the bracket with the weakest 1 seed, which I think North Carolina and UConn are the teams that are being overpicked the most. So if you're in bracket pools that are of like a decent size, I don't think you're going to have an edge if you take either one of those teams to be your champion, really, to be honest. And I think Arizona actually has better odds than North Carolina, despite being the 2 seed versus the 1 to get out of that particular region. So I do kind of like Arizona to get out of that one, as long as they could deal with some of these like early round matchups. So although I think they got a nice draw there with the 7-10 matchup that they wind up having to go up against too. So Arizona, yeah, would be that. And then I'm looking to like knock UConn out. So like, it looks like I kind of like Auburn to potentially be the team to do it, because Auburn is so good metrics wise, even though I don't like that they won the SEC and had that nice run in the SEC. But if they get through like their first game or two, then I think it's fine. And then once you get to like, you get through those first couple games, then you get to like rest and whatever, and kind of get ready for that next weekend slated game. So if they get that far, then I think Auburn is in decent shape there. Well, I mean, of course, UConn also made a run to their conference final and won it as well. So those teams, UConn and Auburn, both made runs like that. And then I kind of like BYU to kind of make a run as well. BYU, I mean, BYU got a nice draw against Duquesne in that 6-11 matchup. That's one of the most lopsided with the power ratings and with the odds. BYU is just a really big favorite in that one. BYU, I mean, if you watch Duquesne play, their offense is just massively inept, and BYU is a team that really can score. So I just don't really see how Duquesne would be able to really kind of keep up with that. I'm not really sure about that one, but so I do kind of like those teams to make runs in my bracket. If I don't change anything, I think I do actually have Auburn in the Final Four coming out of that. I think I have Marquette being a really sneaky team getting into the final, because that whole right side of the bracket I actually think is really, there aren't teams that have that much value. So it's kind of hard to determine who you want to pick to get out of that right side of the bracket. It's actually difficult to do, but I think Marquette, you got to make sure that Kolek is back and that he's going to play. And we got to make sure that within the next like few hours. I don't know if we're going to actually even have that information, but I think because of him being out and kind of the way that they like looked against UConn, if people started paying attention and they just got wrecked by UConn. So this Marquette team, yeah, they're good, but they're not that good. People know they had an early exit in the tournament last year, which also Arizona did. And so did Purdue, but I think Purdue is being a little bit overpicked. But those teams I think are going to be motivated in this tournament a bit, man, with the fact that like Purdue had, of course, the embarrassing loss to a 16 seed last year. Arizona lost to a 15 seed. So I think those teams are going to be pissed off and want to like show something this year and not let that happen again. And then who was that? Oh yeah, Marquette. Like I think, yeah, Marquette lost in the second round last year to a pretty good Michigan State program though. So you can't really blame them for that. I had that right in my bracket as well. But Marquette, yeah, I mean, they're a team that has a lot of experience now, a lot of good playmakers on that team. So I think, especially if Kolek is back, I think they're a team that can make a decent run. And they got the coaching. Shaka Smart, man. I mean, he's no stranger to making runs in the tournament. Of course, he's done it. He did that one with VCU way back in the day that was pretty crazy. And then I don't know if he was able to do it as much with Texas, but I mean, he's an experienced coach. He has tournament experience for sure there. So I do kind of like Marquette to maybe get out of that. I love Houston as a team, but if their offense stagnates at some point in the tournament, they could wind up being a little bit vulnerable, even though I love Houston. Their defense is spectacular. It's just, can they actually do it? And they're a team, even they do have a lot of tournament experience with some deep tournament runs too. So they are a good team, but I think they're just being slightly overpicked as well in brackets. And I don't know, man. It's like, will they finally be able to get over the hump? I mean, well, Arizona's going to have to get over the hump too if you're picking them. So I just think that their path is maybe a little bit better. And Houston's going to have Duke to contend with in that region as well. And Duke really came on late in the season, even though they didn't look good in the ACC tournament. I think they're not a slouch there. They could be a pretty a dangerous team to make a run as well, even though Shire has not been the coach there that long. And then I think I actually have Gonzaga making a run in the bottom right region there. I think I might actually have them in the Final Four right now. We'll see what happens there. But I think a lot of these 5-12 matchups, I think people are just making picks that are just way too trendy on like McNeese and James Madison and stuff. These teams that have really good records, but they played such weak competition and like weak conferences, and they're up against teams that I think are being, I think the committee like intentionally screwed them almost, putting them up against big conference teams like Wisconsin, who kind of are like a little bit undervalued because they had bad runs during the season or whatever. The Wisconsin looked good in the Big Ten tournament, so I don't know about that one. But Gonzaga, I think, is kind of just flown under the radar, even though they're not in a good conference. They are a really good team. Ken Pom has them in the top 20, I think. I've been talking about how undervalued Gonzaga is like the whole year, really. Like everybody's saying this is like a horrible year. This is the first year Gonzaga might not make the tournament. Yeah, well, now they're a 5 seed. I think they are overseeded as a 5 seed, really, or maybe they've just been undervalued the whole time, because I expected them to not be a 5 seed based on their performance this year, but I do think that metrics wise, they probably deserve to be around that as a seed. It's just that what they actually did this season might not indicate that they should be. So I don't know, but I do believe I have them getting to the Final Four in my bracket right now as well, being able to get past Purdue. I mean, you got Mark Few. I mean, both Few and Painter, I mean, they both have a lot of tournament experience. They've coached these teams, these programs for a long, long time. They both have tournament experience. I think Fuse is a little bit better, though, man. He's made some deep runs with this Gonzaga team. I would not count him out, really, even though it's a down year for Gonzaga. I don't know. So we'll see about that. And then as far as like other just individual games, like matchup wise, I would watch out a little bit for this Akron team, man. With Creighton, they're a double-digit favorite. They're down a little bit from 12.5 to 12. Creighton's got the public action with 64% of tickets, with 55% of the cash over on the other side on Akron. So it does look like a pros versus Joes. I don't love getting involved in double-digit spreads like this, but I like Akron to cover that, and I like Akron to maybe do something in that game, because Akron, look at what they did, man, when they won the MAC tournament. Everybody, like anybody who's like paying attention to college basketball is making fun of Akron because, oh, Akron only got through the conference tournament there because of a stupid intentional foul by Kent State handing them the game. Kent State had the game essentially in hand, basically, and they accidentally intentionally fouled up one, handing Akron the winning free throws to win the game. Yes, that is true. But now, because Akron got such a huge scare against an inferior team to them like Kent State, and everybody's like shitting on them because that's the way that they won. Like they shouldn't have even won, whatever. I think that's going to motivate this Akron team. And this Akron team, they're like top players. People might not remember this. Their top players are all back from that Akron team that almost upset UCLA in the tournament 2 years ago. That Akron team, like all those same players are back on this Akron team, which people probably like forget about that and don't even remember that. But that's the case with this Akron team. So this Akron team almost won a tournament game as an underdog against a UCLA team that was probably better than this Creighton team too, maybe. So, well, actually, I don't know about that. It's close, right? That UCLA team was good. This Creighton team is good too. The reason I don't want to quite go against Creighton here is just because they have a lot of experience too, man. I mean, they have 3 seniors in their starting lineup. I think, and these guys have all played together a couple of years now, and they of course made that crazy run to the Elite Eight last year, which I had correct in my bracket, but I had them going to the Final Four, and maybe they should have. They only lost that game by 1 to San Diego State. But that Creighton team, that's a very experienced team too, with Kalkbrenner. Everybody says Kalk because they don't want to say Cock. It's Kalkbrenner, kind of like Cockburn when he was on Illinois, and everybody would call him Coburn. I'm like, it's literally spelled cock. It's got to be called Cockburn, right? Yeah, whatever. I'll stop saying cock. But yeah, Cockbrenner on Creighton, and they got Shireman, and I forget the other guy's name, but those real experienced dudes there. But as I was saying, Akron also has a very experienced team and are returning that basically that same team that had that really good game against UCLA and had a pretty decent lead. They were up like 5 or 7 with like a few minutes left in that game, man. So I would not count out Akron. And Akron and Creighton, I think they both kind of play like slower paced games. So that could lend itself to Akron being able to hang within a big number as well. So Akron, yeah, that's a team I would look to potentially be able to cover that number there. Both of those teams like play pretty good defense and slow the game. Now, the Creighton is a very efficient offense as well, and they are certainly the better team. But like I said, I would not count out Akron having all of those players returning. And one of those guys, I forget his name, like the best player on Akron, excuse me, I believe he's actually the best rebounder in Division I college basketball. He has the best rebound numbers, which maybe you might say that's just because they don't have any other really good rebounders on the team. I don't know about that, but and then the number 2 rebounder is actually Vontarius Woolbright on Western Carolina or whatever. And that's a team that isn't really that good, but Woolbright is an extremely good player. So is it a situation like that? I don't really think so, because Akron, like I said, they have like 3 guys who are like really good players who are on that team a couple of years ago who are all back and have been on that team for multiple years. But yeah, then of course that Akron team, I think, didn't even make the tournament last year. So they were one of the better teams in the MAC, but didn't make the tournament last year. So who knows really? But yeah, I mean, in a single game like this, I would not count them out with those guys that did not buckle under the pressure in that tournament game a couple of years ago. So, and they'll be motivated, I think, because of the way that they lucked out in winning the MAC tournament this year. So Akron could have that motivational aspect on their side there. But yeah, that forgetting his name, that top rebounder guy that they have on their team, he has more rebounds per game than Zach Edey does. Zach Edey is 3rd in college basketball. So that's going to do it for me, man. One more time, the actual plays: Michigan State -1, Texas Tech -4.5, and in the NBA, whatever it was, who did I have again? Brooklyn Nets +9.5, might even get to 10. So, all right, man. Enjoy the madness. Peace.